Hello, everybody. Mike Erie here with a very drowsy Tim Stafford. Tim Stafford, you want to explain the drowsiness? We literally just saw each other and hit record. I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "I'm tired. I want to hear about this."
I was only in bed for about 5 hours last night.
Okay.
So, with sleep aids, that's not an ample amount of time to be asleep.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. That's fair.
Just
Was there a reason?
A lot of sleep.
Was there a reason it was only 5 hours?
I was doing what do you want to call it? Like a vulnerability session with some male friends. We were trying to talk about our anxieties and different things. And but most people like to do that later than I function. And then I had the gym this morning at 5, and that's the only thing I do that's physically healthy for me. So I feel like I can't miss it.
Nice work.
Got to get up.
Yeah. So you had, I mean, dude, look at you.
Look at
sound
me. I'm
mind,
just a pillar
sound
of
body.
Health.
Yes. Sharing anxieties. Look at us. We're men.
That's right.
We have anxieties.
This is true.
Guys, we're so excited to be with you today. We have a YouTube channel if you want to see Tim's blonde hair under a hat.
There you go.
We have an Etsy store with merch. Tim is wearing the Voxology cap today.
It's true. It's embroidered. It's beautiful.
It is. Yes. And we have a Patreon and a Tidely page and a whole community of people that support us. So thank you
Makes
for
all
that.
Dreams possible.
It really does. And speaking of dreams, I had the weirdest dream last night. I was speaking about politics to a very mixed group, and then I found myself after speaking.
This was a dream, or this was Sunday morning?
In a restaurant. No, this was a dream in some sort of restaurant where the conversations were still going, but it was so vivid. Like there were questions and I was answering questions, and there were people who were walking out, and it was just an odd, like I have repeated pastor dreams. So I have a recurring dream where I'm on stage and I can't find my Bible. And this
Dude, I've had that. Dream. I've had worship leader dreams exactly that. I show up and I don't have the music. I don't have like all these things.
Yes. I show up at a church I used to work at that doesn't want me anymore. And so I have variations where I just don't have an office. I walk in thinking I have an office and I don't have an office and no one talks to me. Yeah, just weird.
They're weird. What dreams. Is that? Because I still have Starbucks dreams too, where I'm working the bar and cups are lining up and I can't make drinks fast enough, and I'm watching them add more and more and more. And then you wake up feeling really stressed out.
See, we could share our anxieties early. We don't need to stay up till all hours to share anxieties. Speaking of sharing anxieties, you have been talking a lot about don't be afraid. Why has that? You sent me something last night. You hit me up earlier this week. Like, why has that been jumping out at you?
I think that all this terrible nonsense has been going on in Ohio.
I got context for that. I was up near there.
Were you?
Yeah.
Recently?
Yeah. Like 2 days ago. My son plays soccer near Dayton, Ohio. His girlfriend goes to Wittenberg, which is in Springfield. She had a whole week of classes and games called off.
That's
because of shooter threats.
Yeah.
The Ohio governor came out and said these are all threats from overseas. But the number of people I've heard from about the Haitian community directly and what they're going through,
I can't. Yeah,
is it's absolutely insane. I have nothing. But absolute disappointment, and I have stronger words. I'm avoiding bafflement about how in the world that Christian people can just demonize an entire, and then it turns out that all this stuff was made up. The guy walking down the street, made up picture. Guy grilling, made up picture. Like, It's just this
and
is
the woman
real
that started
world.
it, she said the one that called it in, lost her cat. Miss Sassy was the name of her cat.
I didn't see
she
that.
said that her Haitian neighbors ate the cat, and she's the one that reported it. And then 2 days later, she found her cat in her basement hiding.
Oh my Lord!
And it's just, and they've acknowledged that these things are not true, but they're just like, but it's raising awareness about blah blah blah. And it's just, so this whole week has just been all these things of watching how much fear is being stoked up, and how much the Christian community is just eating it up and leaning into the fear. And so I just had that echoing in my head, like the do not be afraid. I was like, this would be so fun to pick apart what is being, got at in this. Yeah. Because we are a culture that just likes to pour kerosene on the fire and stoke that fear as much as possible. Like our tribe is a very fearful tribe, and it's strange.
It's so strange. It's kind of like, I don't know of a good analogy, but it feels like it's kind of like when you're a little kid and your dad is the meanest and toughest son of a gun on the block, and you're walking around, terrified of everyone else's family or something. Like it doesn't compute that that resurrection believers and God worshipers are not only fearful, but we appeal to fear in order to justify so many actions, right? So
it's so funny because you have that tandem coupled with this week. Somebody somewhere, I'm gonna keep it vague, came and gave a big I was talking to my friends about how, in therapy we talk about how we're gonna break some of these cycles of things that we grew up with, like theology that made us feel so ashamed that we're all unpacking in therapy fearful. Now and fearful, and how we don't want to have our kids carry that legacy, right? We want to break that cycle and give them a healthy blah blah blah. And then this thing happens where this person is teaching on like abundance and asking God, like that kind of like prosperity, all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, man, that's getting fed back into the younger generation again already.
Yeah.
But the tandem between, because it's tending to come from kind of the same demographic, this idea of prosperity and abundance and fear. And so preaching both of these things is fascinating. Like you are under threat, you are persecuted, everything's coming for you, these immigrants, everything, blah, blah, blah. At the same time, God's going to give you everything that you ask for. And it's just so fascinating, the balancing act that's involved within the same kind of parameters. And it all feels like fear. It's either you are under threat or you are lacking. And God can, so it's just like, man.
Yep. It's funny,
wild.
so much of our Christianity is based on fear, right? Yeah. Fear of hell, fear of wrath, fear of God's anger,
being left behind.
I mean, like totally, just so much of it's based on fear. But fear has been weaponized and really, that's one of the legacies of 2016, 2020. And, now it's just, it's weaponized to such a hysterical degree that I remember it was in 2020 or 2016. I don't remember, but it was an election year and they all blend together. No, 2020. And I was in therapy with a different therapist, and she was just saying, we were talking about how stressful it is. So it was COVID. It was, we had racial reckonings around the country. We had an election. I mean, wow. I mean, just insane stuff. And she was just talking about how when she looks out at the world and social media, whatever, all she sees are frightened children.
Yeah.
And everyone's acting out of their amygdala. Fight or flight. The world's coming. The world's awful. It's coming to take our stuff. We're lacking. We're not enough. We're whatever. And, part of that is normal to a pandemic that we'd never experienced before, an election cycle that was nuts, and January 6th and all of that sort of thing. But it is odd. And part of the Christian answer to this is extremely unhelpful. So there's this trite line that says, hey, 365 times in the Bible, we're told, do not be afraid. And that's often when angels show up. And, in all of their not humanness, and people just go, whoa. And it's almost like, hey guys, God just knew we'd be afraid. And so, or perfect love casts out fear. And I don't think that is at all. That's a wonderful example of individualizing and westernizing concepts that are communal. Part of the role of the church is to encourage. And that means to breathe courage into each other. It's not to make you feel better about yourself. To encourage literally means to inspire each other to courage, right? Or to like prompt each and every each other to good deeds. Like there's work that we do in community together. If we're all sitting here with devotional calendars that say, do not be afraid, that does absolutely nothing, especially when we've been programmed in a lot of, not all, but in a lot of Christian circles to live in fear of either the world, of God, of both, of whatever. So amen, Tim. Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as two very non-anxious people, we've got this mastered.
Totally.
I've got an email, and this is a rant that I want to prepare us. I don't know what the rant. No, their email will prompt a rant by me. Gotcha. So I am rant GPT today.
I can see
you just
give me up already.
You just give me a prompt, and I'll go. And I'm going to be hyperbolic, so I'm going to overstate things. But this is such a sweet and kind email, and I just want to say, God, would you damn the kind of Christianity that makes this kind of email prompted? So please forgive my lack of a funny and clever quip to break the ice. I'm just not in the mood. First of all, that in itself
this is the beginning of the email. This is not you.
No, correct. I'm reading now. But I want to say that itself is a quip that breaks the ice. Yeah. So well done. As a 40-year-old, uneducated, unskilled, blue-collar laborer, what is my place in the kingdom? What will my place be in new creation? I often hear and read that God's kingdom needs more than just pastors and worship leaders. Yes, amen. I absolutely believe that. But the litany of examples that follow are often, and by often I mean always, white-collar professionals like surgeons, lawyers, civic engineers, entrepreneurs, etc., but never fast food workers, janitors, forklift drivers, me, or any other manual or menial job. I've heard Sky talk about vocation as opposed to calling, which I like. And I, says the emailer, think he's right. Sadly, I believe that the concept of vocational kingdom work is only seen through the lens of white-collar professionalism, where a person who has a well-paying job and who has the agency and credentials to change their situation if they so wish, just has trouble finding meaning or purpose in their job. With few exceptions, these brothers and sisters in Christ are often completely aloof to the privilege they have. I go to work at 1 p.m. I don't get home to 10 or 11 p.m. I barely see my children during the work week. My wife and I are ships passing in the night. I don't do this for, quote, meaning. I do it to keep my family and myself out of poverty. Believe it or not, through much prayer, heartache, and yes, meds and therapy, I've learned to be content with my situation. What I'm not content with, however, is the disinterest and apathy my wife and I received at every church body we've tried to be a part of. We're not affluent enough to financially contribute to the church. We're not available enough to do church work or do community groups because of our work schedules, and we're not poor enough to need assistance. Now think about that. We're not rich enough to give. We don't have time enough to serve, and we're not poor enough to need help. Where do we fit? Like those are the only boxes. So I ask, as a middle-aged, uneducated, unskilled, blue-collar laborer, what is my place in the kingdom? So, I feel. Let's use my feelings chart from my therapist. I feel furious at myself and at other Christians who have created a hierarchy in Christian circles of meaning, purpose, and significance. And it was funny, last week at our church, we were looking at Roman hierarchy. The Romans had a very defined social hierarchy with slaves at the bottom and the emperor at the top. And we were looking at Paul's teaching about Jesus, where Jesus, like, he actually is at the top in the very nature God. He's even above the emperor. And then he takes on the very likeness of a human, and not just any human, but a slave. So he goes to the bottom, but not just any slave, an obedient slave, and not just any obedient slave, but one who is obedient unto death. And then not just any obedient slave unto death, but an obedient slave unto death on a cross. Like, you could not go lower in the Roman social hierarchy. And so we're looking at this pyramid and how Jesus turns it upside down, because then Yahweh exalts that manner of life and gives it the name that is above every name. So we have this Q&A thing that we do after the teaching, and somebody raised their hand and said, hey, do you think we as Christians reintroduce this hierarchy?
Right.
And so we all laughed, because the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And the joke was, at the bottom, you have those who've prayed the prayer. That's it. They were at camp. They prayed a prayer. That's it. Then you have those who've been baptized, and not just anybody. I mean, you have to be baptized the right way. Right. So it's got to be 3 dunks or 1 dunk or in the name of, or, you can't, whatever. I mean, there's all sorts of rules about that. Then the next rung up are those who can take communion, the baptized believers who can take communion because they're worthy now. They've confessed all of their sin. They're morally good enough to take communion. Then are the people who volunteer in children's ministry. They're the saints. And it is a form of slavery. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I'm being totally tongue in cheek. But the fact that we always have to ask for children's ministry volunteers is hilarious. Then you have elders, or then you have ushers, greeters, you have assistants, you have elders, big deal. Then you have paid staff. And at the top, you have a senior pastor or paid missionaries who are overseas. That's the highest level. And so I'm making this up as we go, but we're all just sort of chuckling because that's exactly what we do. And this email is an example of that's effects. And I don't have, that's where I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm upset at myself for whatever language or examples I've used that would somehow communicate like a tiered Christian system. The second thing I'm really upset about is at us pastoral people who insist on using the hellish language, we're in full-time ministry and everyone else has secular jobs. Mm-hmm. It is an asinine, unbiblical theology that would ever place pastoring as one of the most religious professions. If anything, pastoring puts you in more danger of hypocrisy and undiscipleship.
Yeah, there's a lot of scripture on that.
Dude, seriously. And not only that, but I mean, I opened X, Twitter yesterday. Here's another sexual scandal of a pastor. Here's another pastor, prosperity pastor, who has a secret marriage. You're just like, oh, okay. So, of course, we're more holy. No way, man. In pastoral ministry, you're actually more liable to be corrupt in your Christianity. And we're seeing evidence of that. So this whole thing where pastors will say, yeah, I was called to ministry by God. I left a secular job. I'm so important. Please, I'm so important. Man, come listen to my message. The pastoral work is so hard. Like I've got elder meetings sometimes, and sometimes people will write me emails, but I can go see my kids' ball games because I have a ton of flexibility over my schedule, and right. I mean, all of that. May God damn all of that nonsense that we've baked into American Christianity. It's just the Roman hierarchy Christianized.
Yeah, adopted.
Yep, exactly. So that's my rant. I am so sorry. And this person gave us permission to talk about this. I am so sorry that the only buckets the church offers are, can you help or do you need help? And that's it. Those are the only ones. Can you give money? We'll invest in you. Can you volunteer? We'll invest in you. And do you need help? Because, we're awesome about helping people. And good Lord, I mean, we used to do a Saturday night service at Rock Harbor back in the day. And I didn't like doing it because it really pinched my preparation and weekend and whatever. And I didn't like doing it until I started meeting people who worked on Sundays, who would love to be a part of a church community. And for whatever reason, whether they were in the hospitality industry or anything else, they couldn't go to church on Sunday. And they were just delighted that there was a place that had a Saturday night service. And that really changed my outlook about it. And I just remember hearing from people that are like, yeah, there are no options for us. And so all that is to say, theologically, all right, do you have anything you want to add? That's just the rant part. Then let's discuss the theology of this. Yeah, you want to rant about any of this, my friend? Because you paint during the summers. Yeah. You paint houses.
Well, I mean, it's terrible. First of all, as an English teacher, that was a very articulate and well-written email for, if you feel uneducated, it sure reads as someone who has a lot of really thoughtful ideas and is wrestling in a very grandiose way. What was Jesus's profession?
Bro, that's where I was going. Say it. Okay. What was it? Tecton.
It's just, and then who did he call to walk with? It's just like these were all blue collar. And this idea of calling, I can't stand it. We've talked about it so much on here, this difference between vocation and calling. Yeah, and Sky was on one episode and he talked about it. And this, like, we have this calling language that has become so damaging. And then we've seen so many people who have been quote unquote called to ministry because their parents did it or whatever, who have no business being in those positions. But you can't argue with, well, I've been called. It's just like, it's just kind of like, you know what I mean? Like it's an end. It's not a invitational.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't provoke more curiosity. It's just like, oh, well, I mean, of course.
Plus, too, like working hard to provide for your family, and it's just like,
no, bro.
Every piece of that is just so terrible. I'm so sorry.
Prepare yourself.
Gerd.
That was part one, and you, in your genius, led to part two. And we got an email also that said, I don't interrupt you as much, which I find very ironic because I do most of the talking. If anyone is interrupting, it's you.
That's right. Watch
with
out.
Your random movie quotes. So I don't know what that's about, but
it's a jukebox.
Timestamp that. It's beautiful. But yes, let's go to the theology that sits behind this. Yes. Right? Not all. Many of the big heroes of the Old Testament were just common laborers. Absolutely. Yeah. David, shepherd. Not a glamorous profession back in the day. Right? You get into the New Testament and it's like, oh yeah, how did the King of Kings and Lord of Lords show up among us? Tecton. Now that could be brick or stone or carpentry, but he was a manual laborer. And that's why he will tell stories about day laborers. He will give parables that involve day laborers. He knew exactly what subsistence life was like. Yeah. Absolutely. And to your point, who does he call? Ghostbusters, but then he calls 11 of the 12 of Korah are like fishermen.
I mean, sometimes they were kind of Ghostbusters.
Well, the holy Ghostbusters, yes, but we'll get to that later. Right? The one that was the educated, right, Judean was Judas. Mm-hmm. And so these guys were young. They had only gone so far in their Jewish school, and they were taking over their father's businesses. They were just providing for their families. And then, if that weren't enough, you get to the book of Acts, where all of a sudden these guys are preaching about the resurrection of Jesus, and Jerusalem is electrified. There are people coming to faith like all the time. And that they get pulled in front of the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin, Luke says that the Sanhedrin were amazed because these were ordinary, unschooled men who were turning the world upside. That phrase, I mean, I'm just reading your description of yourself. Middle-aged, uneducated, unskilled, blue-collar laborer. Well, those are the people that turned the Roman Empire upside down.
Yep.
Right?
100%.
Of all the people you could choose. And then we got Paul the Pharisee, Paul the radically educated under Gamaliel, like one of the most famous Pharisees in the history of Pharisees. This guy, and there are times he will like playfully boast about like what a big deal he was. But in order to show how the gospel works, he will come into a town and make tents and just do ordinary, unskilled labor, to the point where some of his communities were totally scandalized because they thought, well, Paul should be far more impressive, right? I mean, this guy. Right. And so my dear brother, who works his ass off to provide for his family and has somehow been told by the church that you don't have anything to offer, yet again, the Bible totally contradicts that whole way of thinking. And in fact, so what's your place in the kingdom? Well, it's the same place as Peter and Andrew and Bartholomew, right? It's the same place as Paul, right? It's the same place as all of the folks, the nameless folks who turned Christianity upside down because of their faithfulness and integrity in whatever jobs they were given that day. Absolutely. So I was just reading, and I can't remember off the top of my head. I read a lot, so a lot of streams get crossed. Speaking of Ghostbusters,
wow, good pull.
But I was just reading that. It was Scott McKnight in the Kingdom Conspiracy, and he was arguing: can we not over spiritualize jobs? You know what a job's for? A job is to provide for your family. Yeah. And that in the New Testament's really important, right? Paul will write in Ephesians, hey, those of you who are stealing, stop it. Work with your hands so you give something to the poor. Paul will write to Timothy, make it your life's ambition to live a peaceful and quiet life, to work with your hands, and to mind your own business, so that you might win the respective outs. I mean, it's like, what? Like, we're never invited to do great things for God. We're invited in our humanness to work. Now, work is toil. We're going to talk about this in a couple of episodes when we get to the judgment on, not the judgment on the man, the lament over the man. So yes, I cannot imagine how driving a forklift is in those hours. And I have no doubt that your humanness cries out for more meaning and purpose in that. But the idea that our meaning and purpose should come from what we do, that's an American idea.
Totally. And
that's not...
yeah.
Who interrupted
sorry.
now,
I'm
emailer?
So sorry.
Who interrupted now? No, dude, go.
But after that whole abundance, the abundance thing just from earlier that I was mentioning from this week, the conversation led to just the church's obsession with capitalism. And you can see that this is a byproduct of that, like adopting, like pulling that into your theology, this American dream, capitalistic nature breeds this kind of ground. And then it made me think, like, I'll always joke around in here about my first church of Golgotha, but the whole thing came from, this 7 Mountain Mandate pushback and this idea of these churches seeking power and position. And what was his name? Curtis Chang, I think, that said the the only mountain that our God, was Golgotha, the mountain where he stripped himself of power. And it's just like, we are just so backwards. The way that this emailer feels should never even be a part of the conversation. But instead, we've built a system that just breeds this. You email back in and send me your address, because I've got First Church of Golgotha stickers, and I'll send you one.
What?
You can run around with those.
Yeah. I love that, Timothy. How many do you have? Because we might get a few emails.
I think I have like 50.
Okay. For the first 50, which exhausts our listenership.
You get a sticker and you get a sticker.
Oh, man, my allergies are driving me crazy today. I'm sorry, I'm sniffing and I'm got to sneeze. And I don't know, man. It's turning a little fallish. It's still 90 degrees today.
We already, whatever. That whole idea of like.
Keep this in here. Oh, sorry.
The capitalistic abundance conversation led into a Sermon on the Mount conversation, and I just keep toiling back and forth over and over the Sermon on the Mount and the Lord's Prayer. Like I just keep going back and forth between those two. I mean, every day. They're just in my head.
It's the same passage.
It is, right? And we were talking about how he wraps up the Sermon on the Mount, and it's just like, hey, I just gave you all this amazing stuff. But what all it really means is love your neighbor. Like just what is it, Rabbi? Hello.
Yeah.
The rest is commentary.
Or Kiva. The rest is commentary. That's it.
Just like, this is all just bad. It's just it makes me angry. I'm sorry.
Your love is like bad medicine. Bad medicine is what I need, says Bon Jovi. I have one more before I was so rudely interrupted by Tim Stafford. Paul will also say to Timothy that if anyone does not work to provide for their family, they're worse than an unbeliever. You know what I mean? Like it's okay to have a job that simply puts food on the table. There's
jobs.
That's most jobs. Like doing this with you, bro. It like my back hurts from forklifting this podcast. Okay. So, but in all seriousness, yes, the idea that our job should be the primary source of meaning and significance in our life, that is not a biblical idea at all. At all. The primary source of meaning and joy in life is relational. It's not vocational. So I don't know if we've beat the horse long after it was toast, but my goodness, I read this and I was like, I feel ranty. I do.
Well, it's one email on behalf of God knows how many people.
Right. Well, how many stay-at-home parents?
Oh,
my sweet brother, Brad, who we love, he stays at home with his kids. His wife's a doctor.
Yeah.
One of his kids has special needs. And so he is a full-time like Uber driver, chef, model, I mean, like, and he's had a hard time with the expectation of culture that says, well, yeah, dude, what's wrong with you that you're at home with the kids? I talked to a guy who moved to Nashville to work for a Christian nonprofit. The Christian nonprofit turned out to be awful. And he's at home right now with his kids. And it's like that somehow isn't as godly or masculine. I mean, give me a break.
It feels weird. It's just like you want to say, don't let the church define you, which feels sad, but absolutely true. In every example you just gave.
Don't let the church define you. Yes. Yeah. Exactly right. Unless it's defining you along biblical lines. So here we are. We're siblings. We're part of the household of faith. We take care of each other. Absolutely. Yes, we're power with, power under. And so I'm so sorry this person isn't at either the First Church of Golgotha or the church I work for in Tennessee. Because where do you belong in the kingdom? Right next to me, right next to Tim. If we're there, I don't even know if we're there, but if we were there, we'd be sitting right next to you going, hey, what you're doing is really, really important. And so thank you for trusting us with your frustration. And I just lament. where we just keep reintroducing, and I see it in myself, so I'm guilty. I see it in the church where we keep reintroducing the Roman social hierarchy.
Yep.
And over and over and over, in so much of Paul's language. We're starting Ephesians this week. We've done politics. So politics was called the misfits. So now we're calling Ephesians the offspring, which is, I just love. But so much of what Paul is doing there is dismantling.
Separated.
Exactly. And that's what they were doing. And Paul's like, no, you got to have self-esteem. Sorry, offspring songs. All right. Anyway, thank you, dear emailer, for trusting us with that. And I'm so sorry for the way in which I and others have in any way conveyed. And he wasn't saying that we have, but I just look back and go, well, I'm sure I have. I've been yapping my gums for over 20 years.
Yeah, it's the same thing as all the Me Too stuff and whatever, where it's like, I may not have, there's elements of how women have been treated in this world that I may not have done firsthand, but I've participated in a system that does that. And so while I may not be super like firsthand guilty of a lot of these things, I participate in systems that make people feel this way. And I don't want to do that. I want to be reminded and I want to be like shown. It's just, man, that was like, did you ever get into Fugazi, the band? They had a song called Merchandise, but the whole chorus was like, you are not what you own. But it made me think of this too. Like, you are not what you do. We're so much more than that.
Dude, Fugazi's a good sermon series name too.
They got
so we need to think of a Fugazi. All right. Speaking of women, we are in a section. I'm killer. I am killer with these transitions. 37 minutes in. Timestamp. God's lament over the woman. I don't even know if we'll get through it all today. I don't even know. But you know what?
I don't even know.
Only Phil Vischer's counting. So I don't know how many episodes this is.
He'll tell you.
But when we last left Genesis, God was lamenting over the new state of the world. And I think, bro, I think there's some really good stuff we got to get to in Genesis after we did all of this work. Like the Noah story we've got to get to, the Abraham story we've got to get to. Like the rest of Genesis plays all of this out. So I just think we have to. Maybe we can come up with like more fun titles. Tim and I, we love to title things for the things that we think are funny and not for accessibility reasons. So maybe we'll get better at that. All that's
why this is the biggest podcast in America.
Well, if by big you mean, man, I'm going to sneeze again. Keep that in. Allergies, dude. I've taken 2 forms of allergy medicine. Yeah. So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you. Now, God only curses the ground and the serpent. He does not curse the man and woman. That is so important.
Yeah.
And to the man and the woman, he almost laments over the new state of affairs. So he's cursing the serpent. He says, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He, again, offspring, seed can either be singular or plural. So we've used it plural, your offspring, plural. But now there's a singular offspring, a he, who will crush the snake's head, not the snake's seed, but the snake's head. And you, the snake, will strike his heel. So all of a sudden, childbearing is in view here. There's going to be a conflict that involves childbearing. And we explored this a little bit, but I thought what this meant in the next verse is that, well, the woman was going to have pain in childbearing now. And I would teach this all over the place, that God would frustrate the impulse to fill. That was so the twin commands to the couple were fill and rule/subdue. And so when God laments over the woman, their filling purpose, vocation, is frustrated now. It's difficult. And their subduing impulse is now difficult. To creation will no longer work with them, in other words. And I still think that's what's happening here. But I don't think what's being referred to is pain in labor. I think it's a different kind of pain. All right. So the next verse, to the woman, God said, no, he's not cursing. He's naming the new reality. I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. Now, the phrase I will make sounds like, hey, guys, I'm making. This is language that's used to describe in other places the natural consequences of action. So you get like in prophetic writings where somebody is offered, they're warned about what will happen if they don't repent. They don't repent, and then the thing happens. It's not God introducing a foreign event to them. Totally. It's the inevitable result. So I get where this gets a little confusing, and you can test this yourself. You don't have to take my word for this. But God, I don't think the picture here is
How do you
God.
even test it?
That's funny.
Don't stick your hand in the fire. It's going to burn your hand.
I mean, yes. But I mean, do research on the exegesis I'm about to present.
Sounds like you're telling everybody to go F around and find out.
Well, there are enough Christian leaders doing that these days that, if you can't beat them, join them. To the woman, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Now, that sounds in English like evidently before you did not need drugs and, help. And what are those things? Spinal tap things? What are those? Epidurals. And my wife had 3 C-sections, so she knows about, awful. It sounds exactly like God saying, yep, it was easy before. Now you guys blew it, and now I'm going to make it hard.
Yep.
All right, so the I will make is just the consequences of the fall. It's not him introducing some extra thing. But the first word, I will make your pains in childbearing, that first word, pains. All right, now there are 3 words we got to define here. That word is etstaban. I think, again, don't know how to pronounce Hebrew. I'm a neophyte when it comes to the Hebrew. So etstaban, that's what we're going to call it. And that word is translated pain or grief. And that pain or grief is attached to childbearing. That's a different word, haron. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then with painful labor, etseb is that word, you will give birth to children. So 3 words we're going to define. The first word is pains, and pains attached to childbearing. That's the second word. And then painful labor is the third word. All right? We're going to look at these. We're going to call it an episode. It's going to be glorious. So, etstaban, that's how you pronounce it, interestingly enough, is never used for labor pains in the entire Old Testament. There are other words to describe labor pains. This is not one of those words. And in fact, I didn't know this. The same word is used in the lament over the man. And it's translated differently. So, to Adam, God said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you must not eat of it, cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat fruit of it all the days of your life. So, the same word, we're translating it pain as in labor pain, but that same word is translated in painful toil, like hard work. And it's very much interesting because, again, the work This word itztaban, whatever it's called, is never used of labor pain. It's just used of labor. Labor. That's it. And it's translated to the guy as like toiling in a field. So with hard work, with pain/grief, that is going to be attached to childbearing. Now, the interesting thing about childbearing, this word haron is it's never labor pain. It comes from the Hebrew word hara, and the verb form occurs 62 times in the Hebrew Bible, and it's used of the phrase got pregnant. It's not used of labor pain. It's describing conception. So I will increase your pains in childbearing. The word pain there isn't labor pain. And the word childbearing is better rendered conception. That's where it's used. That's where it's used 2 times. Right? The next chapter, and she got pregnant. That's the word haron. Cain's had sex with his wife. She got pregnant. Hagar got pregnant. Sarah got pregnant. So the bearing of children isn't what's in view here. It's the conception of children that's in view here. Okay?
Okay.
So one last piece of this. All right. So the word, again, I will make your pains, itztaban, means labor, but not like childbearing pain, but just the labor of labor.
Laborious.
Yeah. Yes. I will make your pains or labor in childbearing. And then the word childbearing there, it's only attached to childbearing in this one instance. Everywhere else it means conception. So I will increase the labor of your getting pregnant. Okay?
So many jokes I'm not saying out loud.
Yep. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Now, here's the kicker that shows us we're interpreting this rightly. The word esteb, with painful labor, you will give birth to children. All right? Esteb can be used of a combined physical and emotional pain that results from difficult work or circumstances. It's emotional pain that has to do with difficult work or circumstances. So in Proverbs, the blessings of the Lord bring wealth without painful toil for it. So what are we describing in that? Are we describing birth pains? No, we're describing the hard work in the guy's email of driving a forklift.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the driving of the forklift that's painful, but it's the emotional toil of being judged for that.
Yep.
Proverbs 14, all hard work brings a profit, esteb, but mere talk only to poverty. One scholar puts it this way. I got to blow my nose again. I'm so sorry. It's just sitting there, Tim. There it is. The word esteb, this is from Ian Provan, one of my favorite OT scholars. The word esteb, painful labor, is used of emotional pain and the pain involved in work. It can also be used of a more generalized kind of pain. It is never used elsewhere in the Old Testament to refer to labor pains or birth pangs. Conversely, there is a well-established vocabulary which is routinely used for labor pain. If we take our lead from the meaning of esteb elsewhere in the Old Testament, Genesis 3:16, the verse we're looking at, refers to the agony, hardship, worry, and anxiety of the circumstances in which children are conceived, born, and raised, and in which they die. This is the same word's clear meaning when used in describing the man's work. So here's the idea. I will multiply your itztaban, right? Your grief or your labor around heron, which is conception, Not just the physical act, though, but the giving birth of children, the whole process. Do you see that?
Yep.
It's like, it's not just that moment, and it's not the birthing, but it's the whole, like there are so many people roaming around our earth. I just saw an article, and I don't remember where it was, but it was like, is it wrong to have children in our world? That's the kind of world, the state of affairs that leads you to that conclusion. That's the painful labor. So Tim Mackey retranslates the verse this way, and I love him so much. I will greatly increase your pain along with conception. In painful circumstances, you will give birth to children. Let me read that again. I will greatly increase your pain along with conception. In painful circumstances, you will give birth to children. Now, think about what comes next. Instantly, we start reading about infertility.
Right.
We haven't read a thing about it, but now there are women who can't have children. And it's agony, and it's grief, and it's toil, right? Many of them. And then the circumstances around their children produce agony, because now there's offspring between brother and brother, right? And now there's a world where sin and death are crouching at the door of your children, and one of your children murders another one of your children. I mean, that's like the next story.
Yeah. And
so all of a sudden, instead of referring to labor pains, which is the far more narrow reading, the idea is the pain is not the pain of childbirth. This is another Ian Proven quote, but the painful family circumstances in which the woman will now bring children into the world. And I don't know, when I was talking about this to Justy, yeah, the pain of labor isn't just the pain of labor. It's the whole dadgum thing. And it can be tension with the man, the husband. It can be the hardship of not being able to have kids. It can be the hardship of infertility treatments. It can be the hardship of interfamily conflicts. It can be the hardship of, how do I provide for the children now that they're here? Right? But all of a sudden, children are not being born into a safe world, and there's massive amount of anxiety attached to that. So this was so interesting when I was studying this, because it parallels God's lament over the man. Because now the man, the first thing but what we're going to start reading about is for the first time is famine. So here's the woman who cannot conceive, and here's the man who can't work the crops. Right? So for the first time, painful toil is now experienced by them. So the impulse is to fill, to rule, and subdue. And now creation doesn't cooperate, nor does the human or spiritual community around them.
So in some fashion, it's almost like an existential pain on top of whatever.
That's exactly what it is. You guys may not want to watch the YouTube version of this.
That begs so many questions, so many whys.
Beg them. Beg away.
Well, Timothy. I mean, I can just hear so many, and I'm lumping this under one large category for the sake of time, but so many like problem of evil kind of conversations, like why was this the response? Why did this happen? Why did God allow this to happen? Why was this part of God's plan? Whatever, however you want to word that.
Yeah.
Because man, I have heard that. I mean, we all have heard that scripture taught so many times as just about like, kids, I don't know what they thought the version was. Kids just popped out, or you laid a golden egg and it was all really easy and simple. And then all of a sudden now it's,
you need epidurals.
And yeah. And also one of the things that popped in my head, and this may be totally irrelevant, but I started thinking about gender dynamics and what that was before and then after.
Oh, bro. Okay, hold on. Okay. Because literally the next part of the verse is, and your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. That's what we're doing next week. So
All right. So put a pin in that.
It's interesting. Put a pin in it, Stafford, because part of the painful circumstances in which the woman now gives birth is the conflict she will have with the man.
And I felt that in there with what you were saying. Or even what was the big thing that was going around a month ago? The thing on Twitter and stuff women were talking about whether you choose the man or the bear. Did you see all that?
No.
Oh, it was a big. I'll send it to you. We can talk about it next week because it'll pertain more to that. But women chose
the man or the bear, like the TV show.
No, like safety stuff, like a bear in the wood. We can. I'll send you something. We can talk about it later. But
if a bear in the wood falls, does anyone hear it? I don't know.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, so it was so interesting because, and I'd love to hear from some of our female listeners who, like, how does this hit you now? It's almost, I remember somebody in our church was like, this feels much worse than just pain in childbirth.
Totally.
And I'm like, I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what pain in childbirth is like, but I mean, this is awful. I mean,
that's momentary, right? Maybe a very long moment, but
easy for us to say, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I just mean that this pain is talking about something that is more
is ongoing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm not minimizing the pain in labor. I'm just saying this.
You better not.
It's longer than that, or it's different than that.
Yeah. Don't. My wife had. It was 22 hours of labor followed by an emergency C-section, and afterwards, I was running on just a small amount of sleep. Just please, but I looked at her and I said, "Man, am I tired?" And that did not that did not go
Get
over
out
so
of
well.
This room.
Oh my goodness, dude, that was not good. But think about now. Excuse me. I think this is a way of saying now the world is scarce. Now there's something to be afraid of because now we meet infertility and famine, right? Scarcity on both ends of the fill, subdue, rule spectrum. And so that's why, man, you're instantly like, oh, she's childless. What? Where did that come from? Or, oh, the famine? We haven't read about famine. All we read about was in the garden is that there was such abundance. God was like, yeah, dude, you don't have to grow crops. Just take from the trees except for one.
Yeah, just one.
And so I think the contrast is between a scarcity and abundance. I think that's which drives us back to what we were talking about at the very beginning about how we act when we're afraid.
Yeah, and abundance and prosperity idea, like theologies, like
totally
does make a lot of sense in regards to.
Well, that's what the Tower of Babel is going to be. The Tower of Babel wasn't for them to go up to God; it was for God to come down. That's what those ziggurats were for. There was a big staircase that was for the God to come down, but they built the tower so that God would come down to make their name great. And it's interesting, in the very next verse, we meet Abram, to whom God says, I will make your name great. I will make your name great. Which, again, all of this is to be human stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So part of the lament of God over the man and the woman is that the new reality is scarcity and fear. And that conception will be now difficult. Child labor, I don't know if it was difficult before or not. Golden egg, good idea. But it will be difficult. The emotional connection with the person who is the mate, that will be difficult. Like difficulty has now been introduced into the world.
Yeah.
That wars against the creational vocations given to the man and the woman together.
Yep, totally.
So much of the New Testament's teaching is about reversing this. And, there's even a text in Revelation that talks about it. There will be no more curse, which is such an interesting way to kind of see
Totally.
Yeah. Anyway, all that is to say, I think that's far enough because, well, this whole like desire will be for your husband, he will rule over you. I mean that like the instructions given to married people in the New Testament are the reversal of this, and they're not understood that way, particularly by some of our Reformed brothers and sisters who will hear this as, yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. That the man was over the woman prior to the fall, and that when Paul talks about, wives submit to your husbands, he's just saying this again.
Yeah,
and we're going to take a different tack, not surprisingly, on that. All right, my friend. Before I sneeze my head off, any last words, Timothy John Stafford?
So many, but I'll save them.
Yeah, and we got a bear. I love that. A choice between a bear and a man, or a husband.
I think it was a man. I have to refresh myself on it, but it provoked a lot of interesting conversations that men didn't understand, and women were like, "Yeah, exactly."
I hope. Under what circumstances was this choice made? Like,
I don't remember what the genesis of it was.
Like, she could rescue only one?
No, it was like, which one do you not want to meet in the woods? Or which one would you rather meet in the woods? Or something to that. I don't know. We're going to get to the emails now because I'm pulling from the back corner of my brain, and I'm sure I'm not saying it correctly.
Here, let me help.
But needless to say, most women said they would choose the bear. So I'll get the actual thing and send it to you so we can have
I think I would choose the bear too.
Yeah.
Even as a dude, I might choose the bear. But anyway, friends, thank you. We so appreciate you. We're grateful to be a small part of your life. To be continued next week.
Dun, dun. Same bat time.
Same bat channel.